Cooper Flagg will stay in blue. The Dallas Mavericks earning the #1 overall selection in this June's NBA draft. Following Monday night's draft lottery, it's only the second time in franchise history the Mavs have owned the #1 pick. They came in with a 1.8% chance, and now they own it. We're joined by CBS Sports NBA analyst Tim Doyle, and in studio with the director of scouting for 24/7 Sports, Adam Finkelstein. And it's the Mavs, fellas, who get that first overall pick, second time in franchise history. They're landing Cooper Flagg. Adam, tell me about Flagg's fit in Dallas.
Well, he's gonna build a bridge. He's gonna build a bridge to the future while being able to help them win right now. Because the way this team is constructed after that Luka Doncic trade is in win now mode. Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, they're both in their 30s. They have to. Nico Harrison obviously is built this to win right now, and he has said as much. When we win, maybe fans will feel differently. Well, fans feel differently right now because they have a player who can come in and help Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis from day one, and then grow into the guy who takes over this franchise. So this is an ideal long-term plan. And listen, there were a lot of people who were critical of Nico Harrison and the decision to trade Luka Doncic, but this could not have worked out any better. This is beyond an ideal scenario for Dallas, both in the short term and in the long term.
Well, we already figured whoever gets that #1 overall pick, we know where they're going, but now it's time to pull out the mock. So let's head to #2. Looking at who's next on this list, we're looking at San Antonio. Adam, who do you have fall into the Spurs?
So I really think this is going to be a tough decision. I said before the lottery that I thought that Dylan Harper was basically a lock to go #2, but what I'm going to say now is that I think San Antonio, because they have Stephon Castle, who's the reigning Rookie of the Year, because they traded for De'Aaron Fox, they don't really need another big playmaker, especially a suspect shooter. Now, will they take the best player available, who I believe is Harper, or will they take Ace Bailey, a player who I believe is a lock top 3 prospect? There's been a lot of buzz in the last couple of weeks about maybe he's slipping. Could he be 4? Could he be 5? I think he's firmly in the top 3. I think he fits better in this San Antonio rotation with who they already have there. And his shot making, his size, and his athleticism, there are star-type outcomes there. So I think they're taking Dylan Harper, but I think they are going to look long and hard at his Rutgers teammate, and potentially we'll see what happens. I also think, Tim, you mentioned this earlier, I think this pick could be up on the trade market too, with a lot of people trying to target Dylan Harper here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Spurs have De'Aaron Fox, you don't want to say they're similar players. They're both left-handed. De'Aaron Fox is right now in the prime of his career. We're talking about a perennial all-star, gets 25, 26 points a game. Ace Bailey, I think, is going to average 27 points a game in the NBA one day. But that might be 5 years from now. I mean, he's still a baby. When I see him play, it's like a Bambi out there. Like, he's like a young deer. Now, he measured in at only 6'7.5". So with sneakers on, he's 6'9". He was listed at 6'10" at Rutgers. But his upside is, like, through the roof. So, you know, this is what front offices have to do. They have to play this game. Because if you have De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper's not really a fit because Dylan Harper likes to have the ball in his hands. So Ace Bailey's more of a spot-up guy, can come off screens. Like, he's a different type of player. So depending on the roster, Ace Bailey's probably more of a fit right now. Dylan Harper, in my eyes, is like the ultimate safe bet to be excellent at the NBA level, like 22 points, 8 rebounds. He knows how to play the pick and roll. Now the draft gets really interesting, guys, as far as what the Spurs are going to do at #2.
Yeah, a safe bet in that selection, but I think this can honestly go either direction. So I think this can really shake up how things continue after that #1 overall pick. But let's move on to that 3rd pick, Adam, because we got the Sixers on the clock. What's a good landing spot? Who's a good target for them?
Well, I think Ace Bailey would make a lot of sense here. As I said, he has been top 3 on my board all season long. It comes down to this. I know he's not 6'10", but those of us who saw him in high school always knew he wasn't 6'10". Still a jumbo wing, still a high-level athlete, still an extreme tough shot maker. And when he is on, Tim is right. That Tracy McGrady comparison, that is spot on. The problem is he's not always on, and the problem is he doesn't always impact winning. However, you put him in a situation where you got Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain. A lot is set up there for him to learn, and again, he has star-type outcomes. So this would be a huge win for Philadelphia. And if somehow this flipped, and Ace goes #2, I think Harper is the pick here.
Steelers still getting a very, very solid pick right there. But then we move on to #4, and we're looking at this Hornets team where 9 players, including their starting 5, locked into guaranteed contracts. going into this season. What's a good spot and who's a good addition to this group?
VJ Edgecombe is perfect here because you've got a point guard in Ball who doesn't really like to guard. He's supremely talented, but he doesn't guard anybody, and he's often injured. Now, VJ Edgecombe is the antithesis to that. A high-level competitor, an elite athlete with a ton of defensive upside. He's got to get better off the ball, but he can really guard the ball. Put him next to Ball, who's got extreme spacing, combined with Edgecombe's athleticism and downhill driving, and you've got a fantastic tandem that could presumably play together for the next decade plus. You throw Brandon Miller in there, you've got an extreme shot maker on the wing. This fit makes all the sense in the world. As long as VJ Edgecombe is on the board at 4, I expect this to be a fairly easy pick.
Yeah, I mean, he went to my high school. I've had a long relationship with him. He's an outstanding young man. He's a student of the game. I think he's going to need to go there and set a tone from a leadership standpoint. You know, Adam talked about the talent there in Charlotte. I don't think anybody who knows anything about basketball, they knows that there's talent there, but there's a lack of, like, professionalism. When I saw VJ Edgecombe, I just see a professionalism like a Ray Allen. It sort of kind of has a similar game, similar body as well. Doesn't shoot it as well as Ray. Only shot 34% from 3 at Baylor, but he was fantastic this past summer when he played for the Bahamas and all, like, the FIBA World Cup stuff. He was one of the best scorers on the team. He could bring a level of professionalism. I just don't know if, like, the Bridges, the Brandon Millers, the LaMelo Ball is going to let a young guy come in, because he does all the right things and he's a great teammate. That franchise is kind of an eye roll. If I was a professional athlete, that's like one of the last places I would want to go. But as far as fit, yeah, he fits in pretty well.
All right, meanwhile, we round out the top 5. Utah Jazz had the highest odds to land that #1 pick, and we talked about it, maybe the biggest losers of the draft lottery night. This is a team that doesn't quite, we talked about this, doesn't quite have a star, that go-to guy. We did see some guys come on later on as the season progressed, but who do you see as a good pick for that?
I think Tre Johnson would make a lot of sense here. They picked Isaiah Collier last year and really invested a lot of time in him. He is a playmaking, passing lead guard. Keontae George was their pick a few years ago, but I think we're starting to see that he may be better as, like, your first guard off the bench. Tre Johnson, really nice compliment to Collier because, frankly, he's just a bucket. He's a shot maker. He proved it this year at Texas. Those guys fit together really nicely. And if you have Keontae George, maybe you've got a nice 3-guard rotation for the long run. If not, you could see what the value is on the open market for George. And then just for Coach, we'll get Colin Sexton moved to a contender because that's what Coach wants. I think that's likely to happen. The thing I will say here is Utah will still be, I don't want to say in tank mode, but they will still be incentivized to try and get a high draft pick. As Tim said, A.J. DeBonta. Tim, I need you to look up Darren Peterson, though, for me. Just look up Darren Peterson. It's not a foregone conclusion next year that A.J.'s #1. Just look up Darren Peterson. But I think Tre Johnson would make a lot of sense here.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. 365 days from now, do not be surprised if the Utah Jazz get the #1 pick in the draft. We talked about it before the show. They talked about trading this year's #1 pick. I don't think they would have done that, but next year, Kiana, I think we're going to be sitting here, and the Jazz are going to be drafting #1, and they're going to be taking A.J. DeBonta.
Jazz drafting #1, writing down the date. Got it. I got it. We're going to be here same time, same place next year. And, Timmy, we're going to see if that all comes into fruition. But as of for now, Adam, Tim, thank you guys so much. So we got 1 through 5 locked away. What about 6 through 10? Adam rejoins us to give us the rest of his mock draft for the later picks in this draft. That's coming your way next right here on CBS Sports HQ.
So here's a look at picks 6 through 10 for the 2025 NBA draft. The Wizards at #6, Pelicans at 7, Nets. We know we're trying to tank at 8, Raptors at 9, and then the Rockets at #10. And for more on these picks, we bring in Adam Finkelstein and Tim Doyle for more on who they think will go 6 through 10 in this year's draft. And when you look at what the Wizards have, right, and their current roster, who do you think is the best player, Adam Finkelstein, that they should select?
Well, it's Dylan Harper, but he's not around. So the second best option, because this is a team that needs a point guard. They drafted Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly in 2 consecutive lottery picks. They traded for AJ Johnson. The hole in the lineup right now, when you look at those young assets, is at the point guard position. Harper's off the board. I think they have to give a long, hard look to Kasparas Jakucionis. Talking about a big point guard from Illinois, Lithuanian, 6'5", really good feel for the game. Shooting potential. I'm not going to say he's a knockdown shooter because his percentages weren't that good this year at Illinois, but there is belief in his shooting ability long-term, belief in his ability to play pick and roll. And again, when you were looking at this roster that they are building from the ground up, he fits a clear void at the point guard position and gives them one with size, which is also consistent with their theme when you look at the other youngsters that they've drafted in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it would just be interesting if they're going to give him the ball. Because here's a guy who's really valuable when he has the ball in his hands. And I think he can make others better, and I think he's going to be a fantastic professional player. But, man, he went to a really tough situation. And you're playing with a guy like Jordan Poole, if Poole's still there. Like, you think Jordan Poole's going to pass this rookie the ball? Like, this is a tough spot. The guy can certainly play. I watched him a lot. I live in the Chicagoland area. He's a legit 10, 12-year pro, a high-impact player. He just ended up in the wrong situation. Of all the teams, the Wizards could have used a top 3 pick. They needed somebody to revolutionize their franchise. At this number 6, this guy's not going to do that.
Yeah, definitely not. But that's no slouch to him. You know, a lot of great players, or a lot of great role players, you know, who end up, 6 through 10. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. But for the Wizards, when it comes to just building their franchise and getting back to a space where they're respected, yeah, that guy, great as he is, definitely not going to change their franchise. Now, how about the Pelicans? Zion Williamson, they selected him number 1. They still feel like he's going to be the franchise. So who do you have at number 7 to pair up with him and the rest of the players that the Pelicans have?
Can I just say how surprised I was that he was the guy representing the organization tonight? I mean, I think that's quite a statement from Joe Dumars, right, who just took over the front office and now has a decision to make. Does he continue to build off Zion Williamson, who's missed more games than he's played in, or does he move him and start from scratch? Let's assume that tonight is an indication that he's going to build off Zion Williamson, or maybe he's just, trying to increase his market value. We'll see. Either way, I really like Kon Knueppel in this one. This is a guy that just knows how to play. He knows how to play off other good players. Listen, once you get outside the top 5 of the draft, the chances of finding a go-to scorer are very, very low. So what you should be focused on is trying to find a functional contributor. Kon Knueppel can do that in a variety of different ways because he's highly skilled. He's an elite shooter of the basketball. He does not need a lot of touch time, which means he can make quick decisions with the basketball. He's big enough to guard multiple positions, to switch up the lineup, not necessarily onto guards, but he can switch on the bigger forwards. I think he would create a lot of space for Zion if they're committed to kind of still trying to let him do his thing.
Yeah, I was looking at the Pelicans last season. Now, I get it, guys were hurt. They had 11 different players average 10 points or more, not 10 minutes. That's how many different guys played for them last year. On paper, this team should be better. Game's not played on paper. I think Zion Williamson, when in shape, which happens like 35 games every 2 or 3 years, could be a top 5 MVP candidate. I think he's that good. So I don't think that they're going to get rid of him. Kon Knueppel's a guy who can make shots, got a high basketball IQ. He plays old school, and I think old school wins now. Obviously, that's what Joker plays. Like, there's old school guys. Draymond Green plays the same way. Chris Paul plays the same way. Kon Knueppel has kind of that old soul to his game where he's never going to wow you with athleticism. I like Trey Murphy, McCollum, Murray. On paper, this team should be much better. If healthy, this team could clearly make a run to the playoffs.
Right. That's the key word, if healthy. And that's been the issue for them for quite a few years now. For the Brooklyn Nets, ever since, the trio of James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, they've really taken a nosedive when it comes to their production level and their success. So they're at number 8. Adam, who do you have going number 8 in your mock draft?
I want Derik Queen here. I think he would fit nicely next to Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton is a rim-running, lob threat shot blocker who presumably their center of the future. Derik Queen could give him a mismatch player who could play 4 and 5, so he could back up Claxton at the 5, and then he can come in and he can play make from the 4. He can really put the ball on the floor. He's got some of the best hands in the entire draft. That not only allows him to catch tough passes, but it makes him a high-volume rebounder, gives him a lot of touch when he's in terms of his shooting potential, which I think exists, and that is going to be a key long-term variable. We know he can put it on the floor. We know he can pass. Can he get to the point where he can stretch the floor? You saw that one-handed catch right there. That is exactly what I'm talking about with his hands. If Derik Queen can shoot the basketball, it's going to unlock some very high-level offensive upsides. The key is going to be defensively, but when you have Nick Claxton right there, it covers up for a lot. I think Brooklyn could lock up their front court of the future with this.
I think Derik Queen's awesome. I actually think he's awesome. I think he's going to be a fantastic NBA player. I thought he was going to be a little bit more like a Zach Randolph type when I saw him in high school. And then when I watched him in college, he had a little bit more of like an Antoine Walker to his game. He's putting the ball on the floor. Remember that 1-foot shot he hit against Colorado State off the glass? I never thought he was going to have that in his bag. He developed shooting the 3, even though he shoots a little bit of a set shot. Adam, I will say this. He's from Baltimore. He went to Maryland. I don't know how the Wizards don't draft him. Do they need him? No. But how do they not draft him on a few picks before that?
I could see that. I could see that. I think he'd fit with Sarr. I could see that.
Yeah, he definitely could. But, yeah, it's always interesting what these franchises do because sometimes they make moves that don't make sense, and then they hit on a guy who just comes out of nowhere. So we'll be interested to see how everything shakes out. Now, how about the Raptors at number 9, right? Scotty Barnes, you know, he is their leader, right? You got R.J. Barrett, Mayo Quickly. Who do you have going number 9, looking at the roster construction of Toronto? Man?
Well, here's what we know about Masai Ujiri. He's committed a lot of salary in the coming years, and he's traded for a lot of guys in the middle of the lineup. He's got a decision to make at the center position next year. But the things that we know that he has coveted historically, length and athleticism. Who's got the most length and athleticism in this draft? Well, it's a center, and the center is the position that he does not necessarily have solidified for the foreseeable future. So I think this pick could very likely be Khaman Maluach. And Maluach, 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. He fits the archetype of a rim-running, shot-blocking, lob threat. That is just the type of center that has most consistently made the immediate impact in the NBA with guys like Derek Lively and Yves Missy in the last couple of years. I think Maluach could step in, play immediate minutes in Toronto, fit what Masai Ujiri is looking for, and then grow into a bigger role offensively as the years go on.
They better pray he's there because this is a fantastic pick if Toronto gets him. Defense is optional for the Raptors. Here's a guy who rebounds, who blocks shots, who even proved at the international level as still a guy who hadn't played in college that he could match up with the pros. Remember last year in the Olympics, like he got a chance to get some run, maybe exhibition games. Still, those guys are still pros. He made a shot from the perimeter. He was boxing out. He was playing physical. I was like, oh, yeah. Now, is it going to happen immediately with him? I don't think so. I think this is still like a work in progress. Now, how good this guy could become, I think he could be awesome. I think he could average like 18 points and 11 rebounds. It's just not going to happen immediately. But if he could learn from a guy like Jakob Hurtel, who's 29 years old, and match up, I think this would be an amazing pick for the Raptors.
Yeah, I'm with you because the expectations are not going to be that high for the Raptors. You know, nobody's expecting them to contend for a title, so he can really grow into his role. And we saw how he evolved at Duke from day one to that national semifinal against Houston. The growth was very apparent. Now, the Houston Rockets, they need growth when it comes to their shooting, right? Just a lockdown, or not a lockdown, but somebody who they can rely on in the clutch. They're at number 10, Adam. Who do you think they're going to get?
All right, now you said two things right there. You said shooting and you said lockdown. We know they need defense. They're not taking anybody who doesn't guard. We know that about what Houston is all about in terms of their culture. There are not a whole lot of 3-and-D prospects in this draft. And I think sometimes when we're forecasting the draft, we think too much about what has happened in the past and not enough about what could happen in the future. So I've got a little bit of a swing here. I think Houston could go with someone like Carter Bryant, a high-level athlete from Arizona. Now, I know what you're saying. He only averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds per game. How could he ever be picked in the lottery? Well, it's because he fits that 3-and-D prototype. This guy made about 45% of his open catch-and-shoot threes this year at Arizona, and that completely changed his draft status. I understand it's a small sample size, but if he can show enough intrigue in workout settings that jumper is sustainable, it is really going to help his draft status. He's a high-level athlete. He's got an NBA-ready body with more room on his frame to continue to add muscle mass. If you saw him in high school, you know he's got more passing potential than we saw this year at Arizona, and he is a very versatile defender who sometimes even guarded point guards for Arizona. So I think this, although it's counterintuitive, could make sense for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you got to find those diamonds in the rough, right? The first 3 picks are easy. Maybe the first 4 with VJ. I think Queen is going to be in that top 5 or 6. Now you start to now this is where you make your money. You know, you start looking through, is Jeremiah Fears, is this too early for him? Do they need a guy like that? This is where, you got to start, you're drafting a guy in the top 10. He's averaging 6.5 points a game. So the Rockets are built to win right now, but they also have to find someone that fits their culture. Carter at this spot may do that.
Yeah, he fits the spot, and if Kon Knueppel is somehow still there, he would also be a great fit for them when you look at their shooting and his ability to defend multiple positions. Tim Doyle, Adam Finkelstein, always appreciate the time. And here's a look at Adam's NBA mock draft after the lottery news came down. So he's got the Wizards going. It's Kasparas, the point guard from Illinois, Kon Knueppel from Duke. Then the Maryland star, Derik Queen, another Dookie, Khaman Maluach for the Raptors, and then Arizona, Carter Bryant going to the Rockets. And coming up, so we've unpacked all those draft picks in Adam's mock draft. How about 11 through 14? Adam and Tim are back for that after the break. All right, so here's how the order looks for picks 11 through 14. The Trailblazers at 11, then the Bulls, Hawks, and the Spurs at number 14. Time now to bring in Adam Finkelstein and Tim Doyle for more on picks 11 through 14. So we know, right, how the Trailblazers have looked past years, right, after the Damian Lillard era. And they gave a lot of teams trouble, right? A lot of contending teams. So when you think about what they need, who do you have going 11 to the Trailblazers?
So I've got Jeremiah Fears, and the reason for this is because I think Portland really did a nice job on their front court last year. They got Denny Avdia in a trade. They drafted Donovan Clingan. Now, the thought is that they had their backcourt of the future. Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe. But those 3 guys, they just don't fit together. They've never really fit together. And I think we've seen enough evidence of that right now that at the very least they need a contingency plan. Fears is that contingency plan because he is a high upside guard. Now, he's a bit of a polarizing prospect because while he's got a high ceiling, the floor is a little more uncertain because there's all kinds of questions about how that body's going to translate. And I think most importantly, how he's going to adapt to having to share the ball with other good players. This guy was #1 in usage in the SEC this year. The SEC was the best college basketball conference in the history of the sport. So the game's going to change for Fears, but I think it makes sense for Portland to take a high upside swing, get another asset in the backcourt just in case they have to move off one of their current starters.
Yeah, I mean, he's still only 18 years old. He won't be 19 until October, and I got a chance to see him play in high school at Joliet West, and you could see the talent was abundant, but you just see him on the highlights here, and he's, he's still a teenager and definitely needs to grow into his body. What a great coach to play for, though, and a guy like Chauncey Billups really understands the point guard position. It's not about talent with him. It's about slowing down the game, understanding how to play in the pick and roll. So I think this is a pretty good situation for him. But the talent is crazy. I think he's a guy who could be easily a starting point guard in the NBA.
Yeah, I'll be really excited to see how the Trailblazers do, and especially if they do select that man right there, or I should say that young man because he still is a teenager. Now, the Chicago Bulls, Adam, Tim, they are a perennial play-in team. You know, they're not bad enough where they get in the lottery, right, a lot of times, or they don't finish out of the postseason, but they're also not that great when it comes to where they finish during the regular season. So where do you see them going in your mock draft as they look to, I guess, revitalize this franchise?
I've got Collin Murray-Boyles being an option here. I think, listen, he's undersized, and he's more the exception than the rule because he's an undersized big who doesn't shoot it, and that's not supposed to translate in the modern-day NBA. But this is a player who is so good at what he does that I do think he can make it where others haven't. And here's what he does. He's long, he's strong, he's physical, and he's very, very smart. You see him going right into the bodies here, but more than that, he is someone who can process the game really quickly. He's going to be able to play off short rolls, off dribble handoffs, and if they believe that guys like Modest Buzelis and others are going to be able to provide enough floor spacing in the front court, that will create enough of a void where Collin Murray-Boyles can step in and bring that physicality, bring that toughness, which Billy Donovan would appreciate.
Yeah, the way the Bulls are playing now, since I live in the area, I obviously watch a lot of their games. They've decided to like spread you out and outscore you. So that's been their philosophy. Giddey was sensational. He got better and better. They kind of just handed him the keys to be the ultimate playmaker there. So I get what you're saying. You're going to need some big guys, right? You can't just only shoot threes. You need somebody who's going to rebound. You need some physicality. So I get it there. I think Liam McNeeley is going to be a pretty good guy that may end up being a fit just because he spreads the floor and he's got that old school basketball DNA that I think Billy Donovan's going to really like. But you're going to need bigs there in Chicago, so I get what you're saying, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. And Collin Murray-Boyles, he was like one of the few bright spots on that South Carolina team that just took L after L after L in that brutal SEC conference. Now, how about the Hawks at 13, right? Trae Young trying to build around him still.
Are they? Do we know?
We don't know. We don't know. They made some moves in the front office, right? But right now he's still on the roster, Adam.
He is.
Right now he's still on the roster. So who do you have going to the Hawks?
Well, I've got a guy who can fit whether they re-sign Trae Young, because it's decision time now, or whether they move off him, and that's Walter Clayton Jr. And let's just be very clear. I'm not projecting him to be a lottery pick because he led Florida to a national championship. I'm projecting him to be a lottery pick because I believe he's one of the most deadly shooters in this draft, and I think shooting is one of, if not the most important skill in the NBA. He's got on-off ball versatility, which means that if they can get away with it defensively, he could create some spacing for Trae Young. Trae Young comes out of the game, he can back him up and play on the ball. That was something he added to his game this year at Florida. Now, he's going to have to defend with a more consistent sense of urgency, but in the NBA, if you want to make that money and you want to have a lasting career, you don't have a choice. So let's assume that he taps into that physicality, that football background, and starts to bring it every day on the defensive end of the floor. He's going to potentially be a very valuable player with that shot making. If the defense becomes competent, I like him here for Atlanta.
I think the Hawks have some really interesting pieces. They have Dyson Daniels, who's just like a steal machine. He averaged 3 steals a game. And if you go back and look at Zachary Reese-Shea, when he got an opportunity to play and actually like shoot the ball like 9 to 13 times, he's got some talent. So now you got some wings that are like really intriguing. Yeah, you got to make a big fundamental decision, Chris. You know, is this Trae Young? Like, we've seen this movie, got me to an Eastern Conference final, but defense can be optional. A guy dribbles. So they're going to have to make a huge organizational decision with Trae Young. But Walter Clayton Jr., one of the greatest tournament performances I had ever seen. Now, is college going to translate to the NBA? I don't know. That's why I'm sitting in my mom's basement. I don't make these decisions. But the guy in college was absolutely sensational. He won like every single game for them down the stretch. I would not mind drafting him at any point.
No, I think he would be a really solid selection, like you said. Every game in the tournament, he was awesome. Maybe not the whole way through, but at the end of the game, it didn't matter. He was making the big plays when it mattered the most. Now, how about the Spurs at 14? Who do you like to get that pick?
Well, I'm not selling my Liam McNeeley stock. I had him as a top 10 player in the country coming out of high school last year. I projected him as a top 10 pick in this draft for the vast majority of the year. I understand that he didn't finish the season the way a lot of people hoped, but the bottom line is he's still a very good shooter, much better than the final numbers will show. He measured an inch taller today than most people expect, so he's got really good wing size. I thought he made strides defensively on that end of the floor under Dan Hurley. He's a high processor of the game, and he is an alpha competitor. Now, in San Antonio, we'll see what they do with number 2, but what I can guarantee you is they need spacing around Wemby. They got De'Aaron Fox. He pressures the paint. They got Wemby. He's just a cheat code. They need players who can defend their position and provide spacing. Liam McNeeley can certainly provide spacing. If they're comfortable that he can hold his own on the defensive end, I think he would make a lot of sense here.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he slips this far. I had him going a little bit sooner. If he's not there, I think it's a classic San Antonio Spurs move to just take like an international guy. Like this is like classic Spurs. Like they just take somebody and do it like this. Like 6 people clap and you don't know who he is. Like the international guy I'll throw at you is Igor Demon from BYU. I think that he's got a huge upside. You know, his shooting is something that is not in Liam McNeeley's ballpark right now, but he can put the ball on the floor. He's an excellent passer. He makes guys better. Kind of fits that Spurs mode. But if McNeeley's not there, I say it's minus 500. The Spurs take an international player at this point.
Hey, look, they've had a really great track record, right, of their international players turning into great players, all-stars, and Hall of Famers. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, Tim. Now, one thing I do want to bring up. The Mavericks had a 1.8% chance to win the lottery. I mean, they were in the play-in tournament, for crying out loud, Adam. And I just want to know, do you feel like this lottery system is working? Do you want it to change, or are you fine with what we have right now?
Well, I can assure you Tim is going to have a more entertaining answer to this question than I am. What I will say is this. I think everybody wants to see the process. They want to see, you know, like back in the day when the lottery came out and used to see which ping pong ball came up. That's what people want to see with the NBA right now. Because to just open the folder and it says, oh, Dallas has the #1 pick. Forget about Luka. Surprise. Nobody wants to see that. If the NBA is really interested in transparency, they've got to show the total process. I don't know that it makes sense. You know, people are saying this is like, oh, it was rigged. Like, why would they want to rig it for Dallas and an owner who is apparently more interested in, you know, casinos than he is about winning basketball games? That doesn't track for me. But I understand why people, listen, I get the math, I get the probability, and I understand why people are skeptical, especially after we've had Derrick Rose end up in Chicago, LeBron James end up in Cleveland, Wemby end up in San Antonio. So there's a little bit of a pattern here.
Yeah, I mean, when it came down to the final 2 franchises, I just couldn't believe it was going to be Wemby and Cooper Flagg. Like, I was like, oh, no, this is not my vision. I think the vision of me in the NBA is going to be Wemby and Cooper Flagg are going to be the next faces of the NBA. I don't think it's going to be Anthony Edwards. I don't think it's going to be John Morant. I think it's going to be Wemby, and it's going to be Cooper Flagg. So there was a chance that they were going to be on the same team. So I was like, oh, my goodness, this is going to happen. And instead it falls to Dallas. So no state income tax for Cooper, so he's going to keep more of his money, which is a good thing, right? Versus going to a state where don't want to name names. LeBron's laughing at it. But, you know, he went to Cleveland. Derrick Rose went to Chicago. Patrick Ewing in '85 went to New York. Be interested to see if next year, guys, if Utah, with their ownership really heavily involved with BYU, if they get the #1 pick, because it would be AJ DeBansta at #1. I know Adam has some other guys that are up there right now. If the draft was today, it'd probably be AJ. So if the Jazz get the first pick next year, I don't know. I think we got to start looking at this lottery system. It seems like things are a little too interesting for me.
We got to start looking at Darren Peterson. That's what we got to start looking at.
Hey, don't sleep on Darren Peterson. Don't sleep. Yo, both of them, they are cold. They are cold. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how it all shakes out. Tim Doyle, Adam Finkelstein, always a pleasure giving us great insight and entertainment. So again, here is a look at Adam's NBA mock draft. It's got Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma going to the Trailblazers, trying to bolster that backcourt. And then for the Bulls, wants to add some size, Collin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. How about Walter Clayton Jr.? An incredible tournament run leading Florida to that national championship. Adam's got him going to the Hawks. And then Spurs, Liam McNeeley, who was a sensational freshman from UConn. When he was healthy, he was definitely their most impactful player.